You are now tuned into Reppin Sessions podcast. Exclusive interviews with White Oak Roughneck legends. Follow on Instagram and Facebook. Reppin the Roughnecks.
I took over in 1950 as the head coach in White Oak. Went 6-4 your first year. You scheduled the game for the first round of the playoffs. Is that true? Is that true or not?
That wasn't supposed to get out.
Yes, he did.
He did. Because, if Coach Miles really did that, that was pretty ballsy of him. You're pretty confident.
District champion advanced. Well, there was 1 or 2 years we had several players coming back.
What year was that? Do you remember what year that homecoming was? That you scheduled that by any chance?
Well, no, I really don't. Probably 57.
56 or 7.
What was it like winning the state title? I mean, you're the only coach in White Oak to accomplish that.
Well, we played down at Waco, and actually, I got a little nervous at the end of the game because we hadn't been to town very often, anybody in White Oak. They were all field workers that come in from other places, and they were country. And we had all of a sudden there were several radios that wanted to interview our players. Well, I knew most of them weren't able to do a radio interview. So I tried to gather them all up together where we could do one interview and I could sort of help them if they needed help, which they did. Oh, that was exciting. It really was, as you can imagine, building up to that. But as soon as the game was over, we ate and got on the bus and went back to White Oak. Got back to White Oak about 11 o'clock that night. And there was a few parents there. And the first question they asked me when I stepped off the bus, "Coach, what happened?" Hell, we tied. We didn't win the game.
That was back then. You tied, and then you went to penetrations. Penetrations were tied. Then you went to first downs. First downs were tied. Then they went to total yardage, and it was tied. That's the only time it's ever happened in the history of football.
Wow.
That's why they were co-champions. There was no winner because everything was tied.
Yeah.
That was a weird deal.
Yeah.
That was.
The whole team was ready to go though, and Roy Bruce.
They said he was an absolute stud of an athlete, of a football player, from what I heard.
He was a 5A player playing in Class A. Actually, Roy was an unusual person in many ways. He wasn't a very good student, and it didn't worry him either. But when it comes to playing ball, he was ready to play ball.
Yes.
He went to TCU.
He went to TCU and got killed in a car wreck the first Christmas while he was a freshman at TCU. Roy was capable of doing a lot of unusual things. I think the best example of Roy, what he felt about school, he had an English class that he was failing. And the English teacher didn't want him. Then you fail one, he had to go back to the same class next year. Well, they didn't want him back. So they assigned him a teacher says, if you'll write me a 15-page theme or term paper, we'll let that count as your grade. So he went and sat down and says, when I was a kid, we had a cat at our house. And that cat got lost, so I got out on the back porch and called, kitty, 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 kitty. It's supposed to write 1,500 words. 1,500 words. And he wrote, you could count them down to this 1,400 kitty, kitty, kitty.
So he cared about ball. He didn't care about school.
Oh, well, she passed him. He got a passing grade and moved on. He was an average Well, he is a roughhouse basketball player, fouled out of most games. But he played basketball and was a baseball player and ran on both relay teams that won a state championship his senior year.
Roy, you know, I was a little old kid, but, you know, and I've looked back some of this stuff too, and, you know, this is 1957.
Yeah, 57.
57.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he was 6'1", 210 and ran a 9/800. I mean, he was I mean, that's a big man today.
That's the best story about Roy Bruce. This is one that always comes to my mind first. We were playing and we were undefeated. And it was getting late in October. The season was about over, and we played Mineola, who was undefeated. So naturally, the big game in East Texas that week was White Oak, Mineola. We played in Mineola. So that afternoon, when at 2:30 started the last period, I got the team together. Says, now you can go home and eat, but eat light. Be careful what you eat. What you eat is going to make a lot of difference. And rest a while if you can. We'll be back up here at 5 o'clock. And we'll go to Mineola. So we went to Mineola. And it was a game just like they thought. We scored, they scored. Rocked along there into the fourth quarter, we was ahead by 1 point. And right at the end of the game, it was hot, it was a hot day. Right at the end of the game, they got the ball and got on a drive and got inside our 10. Now we're getting down to the last minute of the game with that kind of a lead. Well, they ran the ball, Bruce made a tackle. They ran it again, Bruce made the tackle. Long story short, they ran 4 plays and got to the 1 yard line. Bruce made 4 tackles and we stopped them in the last minute.
Wow.
Now, if we can hold the ball till the end of the game, that's it. So, I sent a substitute in and I says, okay, give it the ball to Bruce up the middle. We're just going to run what we call 71A. And so, we ran 71A, and what happened? Roy breaks loose for 30 yards. So he gets out near midfield. And by the time they got all huddled up and the officials got everybody straight, it was time for one play. We ran Bruce up the middle again. And all of a sudden there it looked like there must have been 18 of the players, at least on the pile-up. And you begin to see them shove and push and kick. And that big old pile of them was a kicking. Well, the fans thought it was a gang fight. So especially Mineola fans, down on the field they come.
Oh.
I mean, it was hundreds of them.
Gosh.
I got to the pile, and by then I ran out there to see if I could get things under control. I says, what happened? And says, Roy vomited on all of them.
He said he had too much to eat earlier in the day then.
Oh, too much to eat. He had gone home and I got to eat, and he ate a gallon of ice cream. Until the last play of the game. Well, we got through pushing, shoving, might have been a lick or two past, but I got all the players. And to leave the field, they had hedges all around it, but they had an opening in there like a gate. Boy, we went through that gate and went to the dressing room. And as soon as I got all the players in the dressing room, we locked the door. Well, they showered and played around. We'd won the game, and everybody was happy. And when we got through with that, it was after 10 o'clock. We got back to the door and opened it, and there must have been 200 Mineola people between us and our bus.
No.
I said, woo, we're not going out into that. So, I went in the office and called the highway patrol. I says, this Coach Miles over here at the stadium and we need a little help. What's the matter? And I said, well, there's a lot of people trying to avoid us getting back to our bus. He said, well, Coach, I'm sorry, but that's private property. We can't do anything about it.
He was from Mineola.
Oh yeah, he didn't want to help, huh?
Yeah.
And we were about an hour and a half later before we could get back to our bus. We had meals ordered there too, but we didn't stop to eat them.
I don't blame you. I would have went straight home.
We went home.
And then obviously the great Max McGee, you got to coach him.
Yes, sir. I coached Max 2 years. Max is probably the best all-around athlete I've ever worked with. I'll tell you how good he was. Not only that he was a great football player, he was our tail. We were running short punt then. He was a tailback in short punt formation, which means he's going to run or kick or throw the ball. He's the best passer we had, the best pass catcher we had. And of course, led the state in punting. He punted for Green Bay for 12 years. So, Max was, then, when I first saw him, he was a junior in high school when I went there. Well, Max was in about 6'2" and probably didn't weigh 175 because he didn't get enough to eat. His mother was in the TB sanitarium and his daddy was an old alcoholic, and just he and his daddy lived together. You know they didn't cook. Max eat most of his meals. Come in and they could beat that kid. Shit, he could beat anybody in East Texas in shuffleboard. He'd bat him a hamburger, and that's where he got most of his meals up there, playing shuffleboard in the old honky tonk.
Wow.
Our mother fed him.
Yeah.
He'd eat over at their house.
Oh, well, yeah, he ate at my house a lot because Lou liked him, and she just put another dip or two of beans in our food, and then he ate a lot at our house. I'll jump ahead and then come back.
Yeah.
After Max was playing with Green Bay, every time he'd come back in the off season, he has come to our house first because he wanted Ms. Miles. He wanted to eat some of her meal.
Oh.
And they talked a lot. So he come in one time, I guess it was the first time, the first year he was with them, or second year. He come home, and of course he came to the school, and as soon as school was out, he and I went up to the house. He wanted to see Miss Lou. Well, we sat there and talked a few minutes. He talked a little while longer, and about the third or fourth time he did that, I said, Max, are you having a problem? Oh, no, Coach. He said, I just got my notice from the draft board. I got to go meet with the draft board in New Orleans next week, and I want to convince them I'm not able to serve.
So he was already practicing on you, huh?
Yeah, he's practicing.
He used to come over when we moved to Dallas, when he was playing for the Packers, and they used to play what they call the salesmanship game, when the world champions would play the Cowboys game. And they'd come, remember that? They'd come to Dallas, and he'd come over and eat dinner. So I was a little old kid, and he'd bring Paul Hornung with him, and guys, you know, Fuzzy Thurston and Jerry Kramer, and they'd come over to the house and eat dinner.
Wow.
You may have heard the story, but it was, it came from those meetings, is that one time they had a curfew, and he and Hornung, and you know the history, they were big partiers and all that. Well, they went out, they came over to our house, but they didn't go back to the hotel. I don't know where they went, but when they left eating dinner, they went out. And the next day, old Lombardi fined them like $5,000. And they went in to talk to him and give him the money, and he said, boys, I'm gonna tell you something. If you do that again, I'm gonna I'm gonna find you another $5,000, but you gotta take me with you, because I wanna know what the hell you do that's worth $5,000. But that came from coming over to our house to eat, and then,
Wow, that's
and then
incredible.
going out to Dallas before the night before the game.
No time.
Max he smoked all the time. And we tried to prevent that.
In high school or later on?
But you'd go around and I'd walk around the opposite way around the building to keep from seeing him and all that. But between his junior and senior year, he got tonsillitis. And that old tonsillitis is sore. It's just he and his daddy living together. And hell, he was sick. He needed attention. Well, the old man didn't take him. I took him to the doctor in Longview. I said, man, this is the best player we got. We need to get him. Well, it was in the summer, junior, senior year. So I carried him up there to old Dr. Lane. Doctor really wanted to help him, wanted to influence him to go to Texas. So he looked at him and says, well, he's got tonsillitis and they need to come out of there. I said, well, doctor, his family's all scattered. I says, we'll take care of the bill. I'll see that it's taken care of. Take those tonsils out. He says, I'll do that and I'll try to help you a little while I'm doing it. He got Max down there and told him, telling him how bad those tonsils were. He says, Max, that's caused from smoking. And you need to quit that smoking. It'll kill you. You'll die on a young age. He scared the shit out of old Mac. Mac quit smoking for his senior year.
For his senior year.
He got well enough that he come back and played, was the top football player in East Texas. And then we had basketball season coming up, and let me tell you who the 3 players were in East Texas that were probably as good as ever played in Texas. Max McGee could play basketball, and he's well over 6 feet tall. At the same time, Don Meredith was playing at Mount Vernon. And the best one of the 3 was an old boy playing at Martin's Mill. And when any of those 2 teams got together, we had basketball in East Texas.
Hello.
We won the state championship. Martin's Mill won the state championship. So that took care of football and basketball. Then we started baseball, and our baseball players ran track. We worked it all together. I wouldn't schedule games on days they had special track workouts, vice versa.
Oh, I know that, but I mean, I'm just.
That made it easy since I was head coach. So we won all of our baseball games. We won the regional,
So
we
if
could
you're not
go.
at that place.
And we won the state track meet. And all Max did was win a high jump. They believe it, the guy liked that high jump. Shot put. And ran on the 2 relay teams he won.
Yeah.
Wow.
And the recruiting took place. Bill come down one day and says, won't you, if you would, go with me and I want to talk to Max McGee. He's in a big Cadillac. So we got in that Cadillac, drove down to Max's house.
Let's look at the next.
Max was in the backyard with no shirt on, smoking cigarettes. Maddie, there's a big chinaberry tree in the front yard. So he parked that Cadillac under that chinaberry tree, and I called Max out. Left all the doors open in that Cadillac. And Maddie stayed under the wheel, and Max got in that front seat and sat down. They talked a little bit. Maddie got to telling him what all says. I'll tell you what we can do for you. You know, in Dallas, we got 2 of the biggest newspapers in the state of Texas. At that time, they had Morning News and Times Herald. He says, those sports writers, says, you know what makes all Americans, it's not so much what you do on the field, it's sports writers. It's the way they write them. He talked and carried on. I said, boy, surely Max is going to fall for all this. And Max finally shook his head. No, coach, they don't use just wasting your time. I'm not going to SMU. Did that come out to show has the end of it?
Did he pick Tulane because of something about his mom or?
Oh sure, Ray.
It was.
Old Dutch Meyer came up there too. Boy, I thought that was TCU made the best offer of all of them. They offered him a car anytime he wanted it. And I was just joking. I said, Coach, can you furnish Max all the socks he wants? He says, hell yes, we furnish 100 of them socks now. They carry them off every day. But anyway, Max, his mother was in TB sanitarium, and some doctors from Tulane got her moved out to New Orleans and treated her, and she got well. And when those Tulane doctors did that, Max went to Tulane. But he come to graduation driving there were some new automobiles built about that time. Didn't last but a year or two. I can't think of the name of that thing. That was Max, an unusual person. I had him in a history class. And I know he never read the book. But when I give him a test, if I'd said it in class, he could record it back. I don't care if it's 6 months ago.
What brought you to White Oak? Just a brand new opportunity for you.
Brand new. I was playing baseball. Used to, right after the war, they had a minor league baseball league over there. Longview, Kilgore, Henderson,
Marshall.
Lufkin, and I believe, there's 8 teams in that minor league, and I was playing baseball in the East Texas League. And we played a game one night in Kilgore. When the game was over, there's a fellow in a suit and tie come down and says, when you have time, could we talk to you a few minutes? I said, sure, I'll be out of the shower in about 5 minutes. And I come out, and he was a superintendent from White Oak. He and the head coach, the guy named Lee Mitchell. And so we talked a while, and he says, well, we need another coach at White Oak. Well, my eyes blinked. That's just what I wanted. I says, I don't want to make this decision without my wife, but I tell you what I'll do, I'll go back to Lufkin tonight and get her, and we'll be in White Oak in the morning by 9 o'clock, if that'll be soon enough. He says, we'll see you in the morning. So I went home and got Lou, we borrowed a car, and we went to White Oak the next morning. There's nothing there, but well, you know what's there. There wasn't even those stores up on the interstate or whatever that is. Well, we talked to her in the school a while, and he says, well, we'd like to have you. We'd give you $3,000 a year. Golly, I'd already signed a contract in Port Lavaca, which is way down on the coast, for $2,600. And I told him, well, I've signed the contract. If I can get out of that, I'll sure take this one. He says, well, while you're thinking about it, we'll make that $3,100. So I got $3,100 as a rookie coach to help the head coach do whatever else, coach the baseball team, be basketball.
So you must have made an impression that night on the baseball field for him to offer you the.
Well, I guess I don't know, but that's where it all started.
Wow, that is awesome. So another question for you. I think it was 58. Something about a player was ineligible.
Yes, sir.
Tell me a little bit about that story.
Actually, back then I knew very little about the UIL, supposed to make reports, but I found out even then, the principal is the guy that makes the report to the Interscholastic League, all games, including who played. Well, that was the second time. We'd already had this, it happened to us in '54. I had 2 years that we forfeited because of ineligible player. Both years we were undefeated when it happened. And both unusual circumstances. Now that one in '57 was the one that hurt most.
59.
Because we were in the quarterfinals. In fact, we just beat Edgewood 71-0.
71 in a playoff game?
Yeah, and had to forfeit. We had a little old guy that was living with a deputy sheriff out there. The sheriff had adopted this kid when he was 6 years old. And he'd gone all through school, all the way, until that game, and then it was what happened, his mother was a prostitute in Longview. And she'd had some other children. And on the county records, it didn't have a name. It said a baby boy was born. And that baby boy was born about 6 months too early. And we got to the quarterfinals. They went to Austin, got the records, and that's what they decided. Well, it had to be him.
So was the opposing team that got beat 71-0, are they the ones that did the dirt and found it?
No, Hawkins.
Hawkins did?
Yeah.
What, were they jealous or what? They got?
Ooh, boy, worst I ever saw it. Had a guy named Red Lawrence, was coach over there. I don't know how they dug up all that information.
I was about to say, how did they even know that and find out that?
I don't know, but they're the ones that filed. And we had to go to Austin. The committee decided that boy really.
Was he an important player on the team that year?
No,
No, he
part-time player.
Oh.
And we had to give it up, had to quit.
That had to have hurt.
Yeah, it did.
Last year in White Oak was
58.
58. Were you sad to leave?
Well, I'll tell you now, you're probably not supposed to feel this way about it, but there was some other, a small school like that, we only had 3 board members. That means one of them who's against you and one with a red ass is a majority. It didn't take it. They had a big community split up. And in a town or a place that small, when you split them up, and you see the same people every day and don't speak to them. Well, it sort of got that way in the community. Really, the split up came about in the church. The church up there, whatever they do to one when they throw them out of the church. Well, in White Oak, there was just one church then. That Baptist church right across the street. That's it. And when they got divided and split up, that split up the school. But it just got unpleasant.
So you thought it was time for a new change?
That's right. ProSide had a good record there. It had a good record overall. And I said, man, if I'm going to ever move up, this ought to be the time I ought to do it, because I can get another job. And I went to Victoria, Texas, Houston, Corpus, and interviewed. And when I left down there, I wasn't sure, because I talked with everybody except the president of the board. I talked to board members, and I talked to the president, the superintendent, and all of them, but there's one more guy wasn't in town that they had to meet with. And he is president of the athletic club. They met at night and they discussed, all that. And then they told me he wasn't for me. I said, my Lord, why you don't want a job? But the board offered me a job. But I said, I'm not going to get into some divided board. That's bad enough. That's where I am now. And so I drove all the way back home, not knowing. And after I got there, they called me and says, the job is yours. I says, what about that president of the club?
Was it Booster Club member?
Booster. Well, he hasn't agreed. I said, in that case, forget about it. I'm not coming into a divided school. The very next day, I got a call from Mr. P.C. Cobb. Mr. P.C. Cobb was the athletic director of Dallas. And he called and says, Coach, we understand that you may be interested in another coaching job. I said, yes, sir. Always interested in a better job than one I got. He said, could you come up here and let's discuss it? I said, I'll be there in the morning. And we didn't talk 5 minutes. He says, we got 2 jobs open in Dallas. You can have your choice. Which one do you want? I didn't know anything about Dallas. All I knew where Fair Park was. He said, Woodrow Wilson and Adamson. Well, I don't know one from the other, but the good Lord pinched me on the shoulder and says, Woodrow Wilson. So I said, Woodrow Wilson. And I went back home and I said, Lou, I got a chance to be a head coach in Dallas. What do you think about it? She says, if you build us a brick house, we'll go. Be glad to. I said, Scotty was about 6 years old. I said, Scotty, what do you think about going to Dallas? He says, if you'll get us a brick house, because we're living in an old wooden house down there, single frame, get cold in the winter and all that stuff. But, well, that's why we came to Dallas.
Wow.
Football itself, any athletics come easy for me. I didn't have to sit up at night and like Bum Phillips was my roommate in college. So, the nastiest roommate I ever saw. Chewed tobacco all the time and an old trash can in between our bunks, and he didn't even hit that trash can after. But people like him would try up all night and talk about theory. That come easy for me. White Oak was known for was his band, and they were good. Of course, that band director, they didn't have many rules either. They'd go on a trip, or even if they just played Saturday for a college football game, he'd take 10 or 15 band members from the Kilgore Rangerettes and put them in there, and that made it sound, the number was big and they could play. Kilgore band a lot. The first year I coached there, we played in the Amarada camp. That's about a mile west of the school. The field belonged, Amarada camp furnished it. In fact, I don't know how many oil wells was on the campus. We could hardly find a place to play because oil wells. I would say there was some luck involved. The first coach there was named Wendell Knoll. And of course, he was in the Hall of Fame. And he didn't stay there long. He just coached there maybe 3 or 4 years. And then he moved to junior college down at Carthage. Well, he was replaced by Lee Mitchell. Lee Mitchell's in the Hall of Fame. But most of his, he only coached there for 1.5 years. And, well, I stayed 11 years. So that made me a long time. I got a little ambitious back there. I did some things like in baseball, I'd only go to the regional. Those kids could play baseball over there. I like baseball, so we worked at it. we wanted the region every year I was there. But I tried to play Tyler and Longview, Kilgore, Glade. That's who I played my by-district games with, that handful of little old kids.
So what was your greatest accomplishment at White Oak when you look back after your 11 years there?
Gosh, I don't know. It's all a thrill.
The 57 state title?
Well, that had to be a highlight.
Yeah, I could imagine.
No question.
Absolutely. You're in the history books forever with that one.
I'll tell you this, I bet you on that Saturday when we played in Waco, you couldn't buy a loaf of bread or a gallon of gas in White Oak.
If you could put top 3 best athletes in 11 years in your time in White Oak, who would they be?
Well, it'd be Max, and I'd have, you'd have to talk about that for a while. The next I'd say was Roy Bruce. And then there would be some other that come along and were better in one thing. I'd have to put right up there equal with them was David Alexander. David Alexander was as good as those others were a little bit shady. He was 6'2", weighed 190, and he could run that 100 and under 10 flat too, and was a straight A student.
Was he on the 57 team?
Yeah. He was a split end. I played him at safety because
He went to Baylor and he won all Southwest Conference track.
Oh yeah.
He was more at Baylor, was more of a track.
Yeah.
He played football and track. And then went to work for NASA. He was a scientist for NASA.
Yeah, he retired as a mathematician at NASA. Smart, good guy. And he could play. As a football player, I used him as a split end mostly, but we kept him in to run in rounds, and he could catch the ball good.
And you had him and Roy Bruce on the same team at one time? That was pretty, man, I see why y'all won the state that year.
Yeah.
Because that's pretty impressive. For 11 years, your top 3 guys, 2 of them are on the same team. I mean, that's pretty.
Well, Alexander, I'm not sure he was valedictorian or salutatorian, but he was honest. And come from a good Christian family, and he was a straight arrow. And boy, he could play basketball. He was all state in football and basketball. And ran on the track team that won the state championship.
Wow.
And in baseball, he was my center fielder and pitcher.
You had some stud athletes.
Oh, he was a stud. David
Man.
Alexander. I'd have to put him up there with any. Yeah.
That's impressive.
Highly recruited. We had a young man there one time that was adopted. Adopted early, and there wasn't any question about his eligibility, but the name of Bobby Green. Bobby Green was he is a good kid. Well, one year I remember one thing funny happened. At White Oak, then money wasn't any question. We could, buy whatever we need. We decided one year to have some new playing uniforms. I said, well, I know what I'll do. I'll let Lou pick them out. So I told her, say I'm going to go up to the house and let my wife pick out. So she did the color and all, and they were bright maroon. And shiny. We got that shiny, silk-looking uniform. Man, they were flashy. But there's one thing about them. If you get water on them, they stain. You could see it. It really shine. Well, we were playing Jefferson one night, and little old Bobby Green, boy, we ran a reverse play. He come around there, by the time he got in the open field, there's one of them was really dry docked him. And he hit the ground, and I noticed he got up and then fell back down. Well, I had sort of a rule in those days. Anytime a player got hurt enough for me to come on the field and see about him, he is out of the game. They didn't get hurt. They didn't. We never got anybody hurt. But I saw little Bobby fall back down to the ground. I said, boy, that's funny. Something's going wrong. Well, he lay there, and the manager run out there, and he come back and said, Coach, he wants to see you. So I go out on the field with the intention of bringing him back to the bench with me. And when I got close, he said, Coach, there's nothing wrong, but come here, let me show you something. I said, Bobby, what's the matter? He says, when that guy tackled me, I peed all over myself. And then oh,
So it stained the uniform?
And he wouldn't get up because he knew. I laughed. I said, God, these people are going to think I'm going crazy. How you're laughing and the boy is hurt. And I turned around. Then we brought water out in a bucket. I said, hand me that bucket of water. And then he brought me that bucket of water over there, and old Bobby's still laying on the ground. And I stumbled intentionally and spilled that bucket of water.
Oh, man.
Then it didn't show. We laughed about it every year at homecoming. They laughed.
I bet the crowd was wondering what was going on. Why did the coach just throw the water?
I'll think of his name in a minute. They carried the chain for us all the time. Well, when this fight started out on the field, timeout was called, and he turned around and run over to the fence to argue with somebody that was arguing along that fence. And one of them took a knife. They pulled him over that fence. He got to fight, trying to fight over that fence. And they pulled him over the fence. And when they did, one of them he got his knife out. That's what they did. They put him over that fence. And they pulled him over that fence. And when he hit the ground, he got his knife open.
And what stadium, where was this at? Who were y'all playing?
Pine Tree.
Oh, Pine Tree, yeah. So it happened in Pine Tree. He pulled his knife out on him?
He pulled that knife out and started cutting. Well, he hit one of them right across here, and it opened him up to where you could see his guts. And they dropped him right at the end of the bench.
Oh.
Well, another guy saw it. And so he decided he'd leave that fight. And as he turned to leave, that old boy hit him right in the ass with that knife, and he split him, boy. A long cut.
Did he get in trouble for it?
I had to go to the hospital.
Oh my God.
Well, one of them sued the other one. And I got called in as a witness. And Lee Mitchell was off that night, so he come over and sat on the bench with me because he's a sellout. Well, that boy, that too, got cut. And Lee got up on the stand, and the judge says, well, Mr. Mitchell, what did you see? Lee says, I'm not a connoisseur of fabrics or colors. I don't know what he had on, but I just know that the fight didn't last long. And they dismissed it.
Wow.
So I didn't even have to get on the stand. They dismissed it.
Well, if that happened today in the high school football game, it would make national headline news.
Oh, yeah. We had one there that topped anybody in Texas. He owned a hardware store in Greggton. But this was a big old guy had that hardware store. I mean, he weighed about 250. He could pick up a refrigerator and walk with it. And for some reason, he didn't like me for a while.
He didn't like you because you were the coach?
That's right. He thought I didn't know what I was doing.
I was going to ask you, did you ever have any moments like that in town where people wanted your job, or did you ever have issues like that?
He did. He drove from house to house, knocked on doors and said, I want you to vote against that coach. We need to run that son of a bitch off.
Really?
Yeah.
What was your record that year? Why do you think he was like that?
5-5. He's a big old guy. And he had a place down on that Lake DeVerde. And boy, that's good fishing then. Oh, he didn't invite me, but he invited two of the assistant coaches. And so I just went with him one day. I says, it's time for us to have a settling. And so I got in a boat with him. We paddled around the corner. I laid that pedal down. I said, Roy, I understand you've been wanting to fire me. If you got anything against me, just stand up at the end of that boat. Let's have it out right now. Oh, that's crazy. That's the dumbest thing I ever did in my life. But I bluffed old Roy. We didn't fight.
Y'all talked it out?
Well, we left her feeling a little better, and I don't know what really turned him, but soon after that, he became the biggest fan I had. Woo, roll, Roughnecks, roll. You can hear him all over the community. Roy, oh, I'll think of his name, man.
I will too. I can see his face, but I can't think of his name.
Oh, he was bad.
So he was the only guy then that gave you problems going 5-5, huh?
He's the only one I ever knew about. He couldn't get any of the board members. We didn't have but 3 board members. They never did run me off.